Hey, welcome to Kitchen Table Conversations, Multicultural Family Hub. I'm Chessie,
And I'm Andre.
and yeah, we're happy to be here with you today.
All right, so this week we're going to start with a question. So I have a question for you, Chess. What
Hmm.
made you lean in this week?
So this week, there was a moment in the car with all of us that I've been holding on to. And so we talked last week. We were at we went and did this family connection conference, and it was great. And Andre is so helpful because he was like, we need to do something to celebrate. Like, we need to start celebrating our like small wins and these like accomplishments. I am not good at that. I just want to like blast through and keep moving and say that it's never enough. So Andre's great. And he made us pause. And so we drove up to this new Mediterranean restaurant that's like 30, 45 minutes away from us. And the guys from Istanbul, and there is like amazing music videos from Istanbul playing the whole time, which
Fascinating.
just like,
Absolutely
so
fascinating
I
music videos.
love other cultures'
Yeah,
music videos.
yeah.
So we were like, the kids are all over the place. There's like a lot of whining and complaining, and also like enjoying the food. You know, like that mix of when you go out where you're like, this is awful and this is wonderful all at the same time. Once they finally get food, then it's wonderful. And Leo was just like inhaling the fries, and you're like,
Hailing
well, this is where we're at,
fries like
team.
it was pasta. Didn't even know it's physically
No, it was
possible.
so impressive. And then he was playing chess in the corner by himself for a little while. I mean, we got an active team. So on the way home from this dinner, everyone's full and feeling good and kind of celebratory. They were telling ridiculous jokes. And then we like got onto the topic of we're moving to Georgia. And we've been having a lot of conversations about moving and making new friends and that process. And so it came up about moving and making new friends, and we were asking them their tools for making new friends. And Leo, who is like, he could make a friend literally anywhere, and the whole family knows it. The other kids talk about it. They're like, well, he's just good at it. So they're like polling him as to like how Leo makes friends. And so they said, hey, Leo, like, how do you make friends? He goes, well, I ask a lot of questions. I try to make them good. Most of the time, they're not. And that moment made me lean forward because I was like, God, it's so true. And he just said it in such a guileless way. Like,
Like,
this is
yeah.
this is how you do it,
Yeah, he's
right?
like, my
Like,
first couple ones aren't going to be great, but if I
right,
keep at it, I'll
trying.
get better and better and better
Right,
at
I'm trying,
coming up with
but
questions.
sometimes it lands, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
And if you have seen this child in action, totally nails it. Most of
yeah.
the time, he'll like run up to someone and then like try to ask them 5,000 questions about Minecraft, which he's like,
Or
or
what
just like
or
some
anything.
video game. I don't know, like something that they might have no knowledge of, but he'll just like pepper them until they either slowly back away or are like, oh, all right, maybe
Yeah.
I'm interested.
Well,
So yeah, that was like a moment of leaning in where I was like, oh, there's so much truth in this and so much beauty in that practice has not been like beaten out of him.
hmm
Um,
hmm
yeah.
And it was interesting because, last week we talked about practicing, and I just wrapped up reading the book Atomic Habits, which many people have read and recommended. And the big takeaway for me, if you haven't read that book, is like it really is the small things that you do kind of over and over and over that you eventually get good at. And in this case, it was interesting to be having finished that book and then listening to my son articulate, like, here's my process for making friends is I've decided that I need to ask really good questions. And him to say, articulate, like, I know my first couple questions aren't going to be great. However, if I keep asking questions, they eventually get really good. And then I eventually able to connect with that person. And that's how I make a friend. And I thought that was really brave. And because what he was doing was saying, I'm not making whether the question's good or bad mean anything about me. Like he's like, it's okay if the question's bad. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that I'm bad, doesn't mean that I'm not cool, doesn't mean that I'm not good. He's like, it's just a bad question. But I'm going to keep practicing and then that question is going to get better. And what I thought that was so inspiring is because as we get a little bit older, as we go from childhood, we get a little bit older, then we get into teenage years and then we become adults. At some point, the over culture teaches us a story and we adopt it that like the thing you do is a reflection of who you are. And if that's true, then you become afraid of asking any questions unless you know it's gonna be a great one
Or doing
or
anything
doing anything
if you're
unless
not
you know
already
you're gonna
good
be
at
good
it.
at it. Because I have to be good at it because that will mean I'm good. Versus no, I'm going to go ahead and assume because I've never done this before, or because I haven't done it a lot, or because I haven't done it 1,000 times, my first attempts or my first 100 attempts at this are not going to be great. They may not even be good. They may be pretty bad, but that's okay. And it doesn't change anything about me. It's just that this is the process of getting good at something. And so the skill he was articulating is a skill of making friends is a skill. And he's like, in order to get better at this skill, I'm 100% unashamed of going through the process of not being great at it in the beginning of asking questions and then doing it over and over and over until I'm good. Now, and I've seen this kid do this in Miami, in Atlanta, in Savannah, and it's amazing because like I have watched how he has really gotten really good at just like, I'm interested in this person. I don't know anything about them. I want to learn more and I want to connect. And usually, by the time, if we're in a place for more than a day or two, if we return back to a playground,
He's made a buddy.
he's made a buddy. And then there's two buddies, and there's three buddies. Then there's just a pack of kids all playing together. And typically, him and his siblings are in the middle of it. And it all starts with questions like, do you have a brother or sister? Have you ever been on a plane? I mean, I remember once he met this uh, a friend, a young girl in Miami, and it was all about, have you ever been on a plane? And then proceeded to tell her all about the joys of being on a plane and flight attendants. And they became connected over these questions. And so, yeah, so that was really, it was just really a chess that made us both lean in and go, how do we keep this ability to engage in things that you're curious about and regardless of the result alive in our kids, especially as we are in this transition? One of them is moving to Savannah, Georgia, and going into looking at different education and school options.
Before we get to schools, I want to bookmark a couple things about Atomic Habits. Number one, I started to read that book multiple times and I kept falling asleep. I cannot, I cannot read self-help books. I fall asleep every time. I'm like 2 pages and I'm like, this is so interesting.
Well, and what was
So,
it?
but I'm not saying that the content is
Yeah,
great. So I am almost done listening to it.
yeah,
So any books
yeah,
that are like not an amazing
yeah,
story, which I will stay up all night
yeah,
reading, all night, that is a problem
yeah,
actually. But anyways, any book that is not a story, I have to listen
yeah,
to. So I'm almost done listening to Atomic Habits. And we established last week that Andre is excellent at practicing. I am not. I want to be good immediately. I don't know if I came in like that or I don't know if that is culturalized, I don't know. But I struggle with doing little things over time because I get bored. So you don't even know this, but this week,
uh-huh.
because one of the things I
Oh, this is new.
don't, this is new.
Oh
So
gosh.
I struggle to get up in the morning. And I want to have morning time, but it's really hard for me to get up. This gentleman can pop up, and I'll say pop up. You work hard, but you get up at 4:30, blows my mind. So impressive. But all you know with small kids, there is to start the day, you like have to beat them. And so I took James Clear's advice, and I am just getting up 2 minutes earlier every day.
Mm,
Now, those 2 minutes include a 10-minute snooze. So it like, it's still 2 minutes
yeah.
with a snooze, but it's working out. So that's been helpful to like try to get my yoga in the morning before everybody's up and like
Mm,
shaking my down dog to get them breakfast.
I think
Um,
that's really cool. I think
so
that's really, yeah, like that 2 minutes, even though it doesn't sound like a lot, those 2 minutes add up
totally.
over a week or over 2 weeks or
So
over a month. Yeah.
I'm trying to buy
Yeah.
in and I'm trying to like take baby steps. I actually went to a really cool conference that was put on. Shout out to Plumas County Boss Babes.
Yeah.
Did this all women's conference that was all about connection and collaboration versus competition. And it was so cool. And I was talking to the speaker there and we were in like a time management workshop and she was just saying just do one thing and I'm like god I really am not good at doing one thing.
Mhm.
Like I like to do at least eight to start with. And then usually I burn out over time. So I'm trying really hard just to do like one or two
Mhm.
things. And so this is like 2 minutes a day.
Mhm.
Um, it's going okay so far.
Can I tell you a funny story of
Yeah.
one of my processes of knowing if I'm going to read a book? If I walk around our house and if I see a book with a bookmark in it somewhere once, I leave it. And what I'll do is I'll give myself about a month. So if I see it, like I'll see it in the bathroom, I leave it. Then I'll see it on Chelsea's desk. Then I'll see it next to the couch. Then I'll see it like in our bed. And after a month of seeing it, I look, and if the bookmark hasn't moved, it usually won't be halfway, it'll be like a quarter of the way. Then I'll go, okay,
Maybe not even a
I'm gonna
quarter.
read this book. Because obviously this book is good enough that the person hasn't thrown it away or has it just put it on the bookshelf. They obviously want to. So I'm like, I'll just pick it up from here. So that's happened to Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits was sitting around our house in various locations for like,
A
and then
year.
literally I had a break between books and there was a book on the way and I didn't have one. I was like, oh yeah. And it was like I think it was in the living room on the floor. And I was like, hmm, there it is. So I just love that because I'm like, if I see the bookmark, I go, okay, I'm probably gonna read that, but I'm gonna wait to
So
see
then
if
Autumn reads it is like, wow, this is really good. I'm like, I should just get it on audio. And then,
and then we talk about it.
and then
So,
that's how it
which
goes.
is funny. I'm like, well, I don't know. You might just start with the audio,
I
but
should.
but
I
it's
should.
okay because then I get a physical book, which
I
I
think I think
love.
I should keep buying the book
You
and
got
then listening and then we can still discuss
yeah.
it because it is
Anyway,
I feel like it's so
it's
good
good.
that
So
way.
anyway, that's my process for how Chessie gets these amazing content, curates it for me, and then
I'm
just
good at
leaves
finding
it
it.
around the house, and eventually I'm like, oh, thank you. This is
This is
great.
good.
Guess I'll read this. So
Oh.
segueing back to
Mm.
that skill of being okay with doing something and knowing probably from the beginning it's not going to be the best or good, whatever those things mean. And then us talking about this transition to Georgia and and having different and having to explore and look at all the different educational options that are available and kind of having to decide what is it that we as a family value when it comes to education.
So we're
And so
moving from a place where there's like one school every 30 minutes. You know, there's I think 15,000 people in the entire county, right? So school choice is like this is it. Or you can drive, which some people do. But anyways, school choice is not so much a thing. So we're moving into Savannah, like, oh, this is the first time we've gotten to like curate and be like, oh, be really intentional about what kind of a setting do we want to put our kids in?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that brings up a lot of conversations around culture and environments. What kind of environments? And that's had to make us kind of go, okay, what are the things that we value in our culture that we are creating when it comes to what we want our kids to learn?
And I think this is informed by some of your work in special ed too.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I worked in special education across a variety of grades for about, I think about 10 years. And, the thing about that specific kind of work within any kind of school or education system is, you really are constantly trying to think outside the box, because you're typically, by the time a student or a family is interacting with you, whatever they were doing wasn't working before, or they've been trying to do it and it hasn't been working, or it's causing stress and anxiety and all these things. So you're trying to take this whole thing and go, what can we do that's going to be different? That's going to individually match this student or this family's needs. And how do we do it in this setting? And so, one of the things I'm grateful for about that experience, it really did help me build a muscle of looking at all the options, even when someone says, oh, this is how you do it. I spent every day of years going, yeah, that's one way. And you can also accomplish that same goal by doing it this way. Or maybe you can add this, or maybe you could change this, or going, is any of this part necessary? Maybe you don't need any of that. And maybe you just need to do these things. And so now we're in a position with our kids of going, well, what is it that we most value that we would want them to be around, be exposed to within a learning environment?
Because I would say that the overculture says a good school is one where kids are like getting high test scores, right? Where it's like, oh, this is
Yeah.
a good school because they
Yeah.
score high and they're academically rigorous
Yeah, like our
and
math scores are this and our reading scores are
right.
this, and therefore we are good. Now, those can be components of a good learning environment. But the question is if are those two the only components? And are those two the most important when it comes to, let's say, elementary age versus middle school age versus high school age? There's a lot of ways you can make a student or a child get good grades, And so the question is for me is I'm less concerned with what that school's reading and math levels are, and I'm more interested in what is the process that you use to inspire, motivate, and keep kids curious so that they would want to, for example, read a book, or they would want to, for example, learn a little bit of the nuances and the art of mathematics. Like what does that look like? And then what are the methods that you're using? Is it shame-based? Is it guilt? Is it some kind of obscure punishment of if you don't do this, you miss recess? I'm uninterested in any of those strategies. Or is it through like adults modeling growth mindset? Is it through kids seeing their teachers or the other staff members and they're reading for fun? Not even learning, just reading a book, Or is it through sharing as adults, sharing your struggles and saying, hey, when I was your age, here's the areas that I really had a hard time in. And here's what motivated me. And here's what inspires me. And I'm not a perfect person. And here are the things in my life right now that at 42, I'm starting and I'm not good at. And I'm not going to be good at probably for another couple years. Those are the things that I'm interested in because to me, that creates a culture. Martha Beck has a great quote that I love regarding culture. She says, where two or more people are, that third thing is culture. And so when I go into a setting, in a learning setting, I look and I go, okay, what two of these teachers, administrators, adults, parents are doing, that third thing is the culture. And so for us, that's the most important thing that we're looking at for our kids moving forward is what is that culture? Is it that learning environment? Is it a culture of curiosity? Is it a culture that says we are okay making lots of mistakes? Not even the mistakes. We're just okay learning because they're not even mistakes. We're okay with the learning process and going from there.
Which is asking a lot of questions.
Yes.
Sometimes they're good ones. Most of the time they're
Sometimes,
not.
sometimes they're not. Yeah.
Yeah, so we get to hear about lottery system this week, so that's kind of exciting to
Mhm.
see if our kids get into the one that we're looking for.
Mhm.
You mentioned before we're going from a homeschool environment to school, so that is like going to be another huge shift
Mhm.
to like watch them interact with a whole other culture
Mhm.
as well, because they have built like their own pretty hilarious sibling culture.
Mhm.
And to watch them get to grow and expand, I'm super excited about.
Yeah, and and in this process, I even though I worked in schools, I would say half my career, the second half of my career was in COVID, which was very, unusual. And then the latter part of it was there was a fire and the school burned down, and we were in the process of trying to figure that out. So Chessie and I are also having to go and learn a new skill, which is, we've actually never had a quote unquote normal elementary parent
So,
experience.
so true.
So this is going to be great because I'm looking at Leo going, yeah, how do I connect? How do I make friends? Like, how do I make other
Yeah.
parent friends? Oh, I got to ask some questions. They're probably going to be really bad in the beginning, and keep going from there. So it's really, this has been a really interesting process of learning as a family. And one of the things that we definitely value is allowing our kids to see us learn things and to see us try things and really in the beginning have to exert a lot of energy and focus because it isn't automatic yet. And that brings up a lot of great questions. It's very humbling.
It's a lot of
You know,
apologizing.
a lot of apologizing. It was interesting. Last night I taught a yin yoga class and it was specifically around the whole class was built up to splits. That was going to be the big pose, which is a very challenging pose for anyone. And what's really interesting is like my kind of dedication to learning and opening my body to be able to go in splits actually started with my daughter. Ruby does ballet, has an incredible ballet teacher, Thank you, Natalie. You're wonderful. You're amazing. And it was last December. I remember she came home from ballet class and she puts her bags down and looks at me. She goes, I'm going to learn to do splits. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good. And I am not exaggerating. Literally every day at some point in the afternoon, she would walk into this room here. She would pull out a yoga mat and then she would drop into her split to the point that she can, and she would count. And then she would switch legs. When she would count, then she would stand up and she would roll her mat up, put it away, and go play like it. Almost every single day. And she did this for December, and I think all the way to January. And then February, I was in here making some coffee, and she walks in, she just goes, Hey, Dad, look. And in mid stride, she just drops into a full split. And I was like, Oh my gosh. And, it was interesting because I got to see the atomic, the small, everyday, mundane, very boring actions that no one told her to do that. No one said, hey,
Mhm.
if you do that, you'll be a good dancer. And no one gave her a grade for it. It was completely internal. And I remember like asking her, like, why do you even want, like, why do you even want to learn to do split? Like, who cares? And she said to me, she looked at me, she's like, because I want to know if I can.
Mm.
And so I'll try. And it's been beautiful because she taught me the process of how do I get my 42-year-old body and hips that haven't moved in that way to go into that space. And she taught me that it's not about the end. It's about, are you gonna continue to show up and have a learner mind or a growth mindset around this thing and let go of when it happens. And for me, it was been a 2.5 year journey. And now I'm there.
What did she ask again?
What's that?
What did she ask again? I I want to know if I
She
can.
said, I want to know if I can.
Mm.
That was it. It was just like, I'm curious of, could I do that?
I think
I've seen my ballet teacher do it. I've seen other people do it, and I just don't know if I can. So there's only one way I can really figure this out, which is and she knew I can't do it right now, but I want to know with continual effort, could I do it someday?
I think that's a question to pay attention to. That question to me feels like art,
Mm,
where it's not you're not proving anything to anyone. You are not like trying to say if you're good or bad. You're just like, I wonder if I can do that. And
yeah.
and that there's something in me that wants to do
Mhm,
that. And
mhm.
I think that's a really beautiful question to ask. I wonder if I
Mm.
can.
And I think that what's really interesting when it comes to our kids is once she said that, when she said that's her reason, I didn't question any further. I didn't follow up with any other rational questions or, and I didn't do what you should do. I can't do splits, but what I've read about is the way, no, I just said, all right. And I let her.
And I also want to
Yeah.
caveat that like her ballet teacher had like taught her steps, right?
Yes.
So she had like she knew from ballet class like these are the steps to work towards it.
Mhm.
So she just was employing those
Yeah.
further.
Someone else who actually knew how to do that
It had
and,
expertise.
and it modeled it. And so she was able to take that, and all we did was we just created a space that said, if you want to practice it, knock yourself out. Great, you have a space for that. And if you don't, you don't. But I think it was having the space to say, this is something that I'm curious about, and this is something that I want to do for myself. That's what makes it art. That's what makes it beautiful. And that kind of motivation lasts way beyond you got a grade on something.
Mm.
That's the real learning. And so that's also culture. Because for my daughter, she was in a space where two or more people, Jesse and I, are constantly doing this. And that third thing in the room is the culture. And so she knows there's a culture. If I want to learn to splits, there's nothing it's allowed. If I want to
Mm.
learn to draw, it's allowed. If I want to learn to make friends in my unique way, it's allowed.
I think that's interesting. It's like part of, would you say that it's part of like individuating in a way? It's like I am allowed to pursue this thing with, I mean, it's not harming me, it's not harming anyone else
Mhm.
that I want to do. And no one is like giving me, I don't know, overt advice or like, yeah, you should, yeah, like encouragement, being like, oh, that looks great, Rubes,
Mhm.
right? But we're just like kind of moving along our day.
Mhm.
And to find that like internal motivation and yeah, I think authenticity is the word where it's like I'm listening to myself and genuinely pursuing the things that make up me and a way to kind of keep like that, having that culture, holding that space and allowing them to pursue that. I wonder if I can, allows them to continue to develop towards their authentic self rather than like layering on a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
What do you think about
I
that?
think there are environments that allow the true self of any human being, but specifically a child, to come to the surface. It's always there, but to come to the surface and be very present at the top. Like right now, it's spring here, and there's bulbs
Mm.
popping up all
So my
over.
flowers.
And yeah, bulbs, and they're there, they're in the surface, but it has to be the right conditions and the right time of year and the right moisture, right humidity for them to come to the surface. And I think that's the same thing with our kids in the environments they're in. There's some environments that it takes that bulb, and instead of being buried underneath rocks and soil and hard dirt, it brings it to the surface. And there's other environments though, as that thing is trying to exert its energy to come up, it's putting another layer and then another layer and blocking out the sun and blocking out the moisture and then compacting it to the point that that thing, that soul, recognizes that it might be better to stop trying and just survive underground. And so I think with in that example we're talking about with someone who wants to express themselves with their body, especially a young woman who says, "Hey, I want to do this with my body," to have an environment that says, "Absolutely,
I think
absolutely, come on up." I
I'm gonna
think it's
get like
beautiful.
flower farmer nerdy here thinking about this.
Yes, I love when you get flower farmer nerdy.
Just thinking about that analogy because I love a good analogy in the way of thinking about something that those bulbs will come up in the most adverse
Mhm.
situations. Like we had to do a remodel on our deck. So like Andre like dug all of like just ripped it out and then there's rocks on top of stuff.
Yeah,
And I was like, okay, well, it's kind of my fun
nothing
bits,
should be
but
living there.
here we go. And no matter like the intensity of the layering, they're still
They're
popping
popping up.
through. And so I think two things. One, that like you can never crush it completely, and those like who you are will continue to come up,
Mhm.
right? Um, However, the ones that are in the compacted ground that have rocks on top of them, they might not bloom,
Mhm.
right? They might have the foliage come up and the bulbs trying to get stronger. But the ones that are watered, that are in soil that's like loose and nutrient dense, they come up and boy, do they flower.
Mhm.
And so I do think that's like a beautiful analogy of like when you
Mhm.
layer, like it will still grow, but it might take a lot longer for it to flower and it might be stunted its
Mhm.
the entirety of its cycle too.
Yeah, and I think kind of keeping going down with that analogy, a lot of that growth, we might see the top part of it, but a lot of that growth is happening underneath the ground where there's nobody. And this actually circles back to the Family Connection conference that, I talked about in that conference. I said, when it comes to creating a healthy, beautiful family environment, most of the work you're going to do, no one's going to see. Meaning, most of the work you're going to do, people outside of your immediate home, even your immediate family, they may not see. They might not see the flowering of that for years. And so, are you okay with that? With doing that work underground, like with Ruby with the splits, there was only a couple people that ever even saw her practice that. And now you can see it, but there were months and months and months of her doing that work on her own terms, in her own way, in her own setting, that no one was going to congratulate her for. And I think that is also the same with getting better at anything or learning a new skill or finishing books
I figured out a way to do it.
or creating a family culture. It is just like those bulbs. They're sitting there for months growing, developing, and then we finally, in our minds, we walk out door, we go, oh my goodness, they just appeared. And it's like, no, they didn't just appear. They were on this trajectory, but we couldn't see it because the work that they were doing was underground, getting ready for it to come up. And so that's the environment that want to keep in our home, but it's also the environment that we hope to help our kids find. And this isn't like looking for something that's perfect.
No.
It's saying that we understand that there's a lot of different things at play, but I do think there are environments that are more aligned with that, and that you can, as a parent and as a family, even bring in some knowledge and skills to those spaces if, for example, that they may lack, or it might be a concept no one's ever introduced. So yeah, so that's what we're leaning into this week.
Yeah. I love Leo.
No. So anyway, in the comments, we would love to know what made you lean in this week, or what's making you lean in right now regarding yourself, maybe your partnership, or your family.
Love that. So we are still getting stuff ready for you for our multicultural family hub community, which will open in June. Keep looking out for it. We
Underground.
just got the most beautiful pictures back from a photo shoot we did in Savannah.
What's her name?
Angela Hopper
Oh,
is a photographer in Savannah, and she is amazing.
check out our
She just
website.
did the most gorgeous photos for us. So we're almost done with our website. I can't wait to get them back and plug them in.
Can I say one thing about that experience?
Yeah.
I had never, okay, I should say I never done a photo shoot with a professional photographer at locations with 3 kids in Savannah. She brought she brought ice cream.
Champion status. Because she found out the place we wanted to take the pictures was going to be closed. So as this like unbelievable professional, she's like, okay. So she like gets the ice cream from the place so we can take the pictures on the steps.
Oh my
Even though
goodness.
like just
Yeah.
so much forethought
Yeah.
and so much professionalism.
Yeah.
It was so cool to work with someone like that. And I just feel so lucky in that she was able to capture the essence of our family. Was so excited. So we're gonna put those pictures on our website, and
So
I'll let
excited
you
for you
know
guys
when
to see it.
that's done. We're getting close.
Mhm.
Every week we have a newsletter that we put out and let you know again what we're leaning into, and also releases the podcast so you don't miss any of them. So if you will go to multiculturalfamilyhub.com, you can sign up for our newsletter there.
It's gonna be
Um,
really good.
it is.
Really good.
And at least, and you'll also never miss a podcast, or if you like to watch on YouTube, a YouTube. So yeah, so go do that and keep an eye out because we're getting ready to launch our community. And we are just so thankful to be here with you today
Yeah.
on this spring day where there are flowers. Oh my gosh, my heart is so happy about spring.
Spring is good.
Been waiting for that.
Oh.
Yeah. So join us next week. Have a great week.
All right. We'll see you guys next
See
week.
ya.
Bye.